Alright, sweet. So I think we can get started. So my name is Drew Wallace, and I am the Director of Education and Sales for NWA 3D, and we are an educational 3D printing company. And I started this company almost 2 years ago after teaching computer science. So, and I taught for a while and worked in technology education before that, and I got really into 3D printing and decided that I wanted to try one for myself, and I got one, and I had lots of trouble trying to get it to work. So by trying to get it to work and through all that kind of process, I decided that it shouldn't be this hard, and there should be somebody that helps people out to be able to learn through a lot of these processes. So I got together with Josh Van Vliet, who's also doing the printer repair station, if you guys go down there and see him. And we started this company basically focused on making sure that people know how to 3D print and helping people who have 3D printers. And then from there, we just kind of snowballed all of our knowledge and everything together to be where we are today with 3D printing. And this is our new business partner, Tim Kaplan.
Hi, my name is Tim. I am a mechanical engineer, and I've been in the industry since I graduated in way back in 1985, so a little older than I think sometimes. And I just joined these guys, as Drew said, in the last couple of months. So it's kind of exciting. I spent a lot of time doing consulting in the industry over the last 10 years. And consulting involves writing a lot of reports and doing a little bit of travel, but really not working with people closely and not working with machines closely. Be careful what you ask for, because I thought to myself, okay, I want to do something where I'm actually working with machines and I'm interacting with a lot of people. And here I am at NWA 3D and I'm doing both. It's been really great. And our third panelist is Abraham Lincoln. He'll be our silent panelist. This is a Lincoln Life mask. I don't know if you all have heard about this, but the Smithsonian has a plaster cast of Lincoln's head. A couple of months before he died, he actually stood or sat still for several hours, put plaster on his face, and he breathed through a thin straw. And they actually have a real impression of Lincoln's face, which was 3D scanned not too long ago, and the Smithsonian made it available for download. So this is actually a 3D printed image of Abraham Lincoln's head. Okay, so what we decided to do today is have to have an informal panel of the three of us, mostly the two of us, and we would ask each other questions. So I'm going to go first. I'm going to ask Drew. Drew, what brought you to 3D printing? Tell us some of your personal story with your history with 3D printing.
So as I mentioned before, like I got a printer because I saw all these awesome videos of like, yeah, I want to get a printer. Like maybe I can do some stuff with my students and I can be able to create something and I can make things and parts for people and I can design and I can do all these awesome things and watching all these cool videos about it. And I got one, and as I mentioned, I had lots of trouble trying to get it to work, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And it would either make crazy noises, or it just would not, none of the filament would come out, none of the material would come out, or like it just wouldn't do anything, and I couldn't figure out like what is going on. Like why can't I just, all I wanted this thing to do is just to make this. Like I found Abraham Lincoln online, and I just want to print him. It's like I can't figure it out. So trying to figure out those processes, I finally stumbled on things that weren't very hard. And when I started figuring it out. So the thing that happened was my build plate wasn't level, so nothing was sticking, and that was a problem. I had some stuff unplugged on my printer, so things were making crazy noises and moving around like and grinding noises and things like that. And I had no idea, like, I don't know why this machine sounds like it's dying right now, but it's making crazy noises and I don't know what to do. And because I didn't know the little codes that come unplugged. And then also with the filament and stuff that's coming out, it would get clogged a lot because the material that I was using, I wasn't using it on the right temperatures and I wasn't using the right materials. So I was having lots of trouble just trying to print it out and trying to get it going. So as I was going through all those different types of steps, like I mentioned before, one of my friends also had a 3D printer, and then we kind of collaborated a little bit and talked back and forth about how we're going to be able to 3D print. And then we finally kind of started figuring out some small things, and we decided, yeah, this would be awesome for somebody. Like, why isn't there anybody out there like showing people how to 3D print and helping people who have 3D printing problems instead of just trying to go online and like a fire hose of information coming at you from the internet. So we decided to start this company. And since I started this company, I have had the privilege to be in hundreds of classrooms. I've been in some of y'all's classrooms across the state, and it's been awesome to see all of the amazing ways that once you know how to use the technology, the amazing ways and amazing things that are created. I've seen so many awesome things in classrooms, from prosthetic limbs to 3D printed doll crutches to so many other things of the process of 3D printing. And that's one of the things that I've learned a lot about 3D printing. It's not just about 3D printing, it's about the system and the process and what you learn from it. So it's about going through your different design iterations and learning, like, I have an idea, and then taking that idea to actually 3D print it, and all of the problem solving that goes through there. Everything from time management, to making different prototypes, to measuring, to having to remeasure and reprint again, to problems with the machine, to problems with your design, and all these other things that go in, to where when you finally have that eureka moment, when you have that printer at the end, that is what's really awesome. And that's been my most humbling experience, is to see all the awesome things that I've seen in y'all's classrooms as I've traveled around a lot. And I know Tim, he's been in the industry for a really long time. So can you tell me a little bit about your experiences with 3D printing? Because you've worked with a lot of the larger 3D printers, like industrial machines, and I've only worked with the classroom ones and the ones that are in small businesses and things like that.
Right, so my first job out of college was at Boeing in Seattle, and in 1992 I transferred into a laboratory which had just purchased the first stereolithography machine in Boeing. This was in 1992. The first commercial 3D printer that was ever sold was in 1988. I don't know if you all know that, but it's been around a lot longer than a lot of people realize. But anyway, there are actually 7 different ways of 3D printing. And the 3D printers you have in your classroom today is just one way. It's called fused deposition modeling, or material extrusion is the more generic term that's being adapted now. So all the printers you see that have filament, that extrude filament, is material extrusion, but there's actually 6 different ways. I'm going to pass around samples today, and if you can just collect them in the back, or even put them on the table here in the back when you're all done, that would be great. So if you see here, the first ones I'm going to do is material extrusion parts. Stereolithography is a different system. It actually uses liquid resin that's sensitive to light. It's called a photopolymer. And when it's hit by a UV laser, a point of a UV laser that's being steered by computer-controlled mirrors, it solidifies. Another way it's done is with DLP, just like on your TVs, where it flashes an image using DLP technology to create an entire layer at once. And it makes each layer by photopolymerizing this liquid. And that's called stereolithography, or vat photopolymerization is also what it's called. There's another process that uses powdered materials, both plastic powdered materials and also metal powdered materials. And all the metal parts you're going to see here today use this metal powder bed fusion process, also called laser sintering or laser melting. And those are the 3 most common processes. But you'll also see a couple of parts like the razor handle, which uses inkjet technology, just like the inkjet printer that HP has on, your HP printers or Lexmark printers at your schools or homes. It actually jets plastic out of a material jetting. Another one jets a glue or a binder onto powder to solidify a part. And many of the colored prints that you may have seen before, like the colored face busts or whole body 3D prints, are usually made by binder jetting. So there's all these different processes and all these commercial processes that are out there. And it's only been in the last 10 years that these relatively inexpensive desktop models, which you're probably familiar with, have started to come around. So it's really great that these inexpensive machines are available, because the same process that you go through in an industrial setting, if you're a mechanical engineer or a designer at a company like Boeing, or if you're designing prosthetic limbs for a custom operation for someone who needs an implant, these are the same processes that you go through when you go through a prototyping process with your 3D printers in your East classes. It's the exact same thing. It's what real engineers and designers do. They design something, they prototype it. I call it, you've all heard about virtual reality, right? Everyone knows that. I call 3D printing real virtuality. So you're spending all this time in this virtual world on your computer screen, and the thing that 3D printing does is it brings it back into the real world. So after you print that part, hopefully successfully, because you've learned how to 3D print, you have a 3D printer that works. After you print that part, you actually have it in your hands. And you've taken it out of that virtual world, and you have it in your hands. So you can feel how it feels in your hand. Maybe the hand grip's not right. Maybe you have to redesign that. Maybe the mating part that it goes with, there's an interference and it doesn't work right. So you got to change that boss or change that ridge where you're supposed to interact. Maybe the holes don't line up like you thought they were supposed to. You have to change the size of that particular hole. And then you basically throw that prototype in the garbage after you've redesigned it, and you build another prototype. And you do this iteration. And that's what design is, it's iteration. And the greatest thing that 3D printing has done, it's shortened that span of iteration. Back in the day, before we had digital design, when everything was analog, that iteration time was weeks, because you had professional model builders who were in model shops who would have to make this stuff by hand, out of wood, plaster, silicone, whatever. Now you can do it overnight, and you can do that fit check the next day. So it really shortens the whole design cycle. That's the great thing about prototyping. And you know, over 50% of all the 3D printing that's done in industry today still has to do with prototyping and design guides and design aids and demonstration models. There's the next big frontier, and it's already happening, is actual making production parts with 3D printing. And I have one here. This is the socket of the ball and socket joint. You know, in other words, this is the hip joint, or the acetabular cup is the actual name for this. And these are made by the thousands, particularly in Europe, because they've been implanted in people for a long time. Over 100,000 of these have been made total, and over 60,000 have actually been implanted in people. And the rest of them are sitting in surgery clinics and hospitals around the world. So this is just one example. One of the great things about this particular part, when you see it, is this rough surface on top. You can do that. You can do this with 3D printing, and the reason it's such a great thing is that the bone grows around it, and it adheres to the bone really well, so you get better outcomes. So the hip implant lasts way longer than the standard 10 years, more like 20 to 25 years. So this is just one example. Another one is in aerospace. The thing about airplanes is that when airplanes become lighter, or any component on an airplane becomes lighter, it's real savings in jet fuel, and jet fuel is real expensive. And a lot of these airplanes, they go through 4 to 6 flights per day, and they're in service for 25 years. So if an airplane can go on a diet and lose 60 pounds, 600 pounds, what have you, over the lifetime of that airline is going to save a tremendous amount of money. So there's a lot of interest on the part of airlines and aircraft engine manufacturers to lighten their components. And they can do that with metal 3D printing, because they can combine a whole bunch of components that are typically fastened together and make one complex part instead of this big assembly of multiple parts. And it can be lighter as a result. So those are some of the industries and some of the applications that you see in 3D printing.
Awesome. So with your experience in like different companies and things like that, what are some of the ways that you've seen 3D printing used, like specifically in airplanes and more like in other ways in medical besides ball and hip joints, and specifically like business prototypes? Can you share some examples of like real world 3D printing that are in use today?
Sure. So after I worked at Boeing, I worked at a service provider in Chicago, which it's basically a paid parts shop. So we were paid to 3D print parts. And just around the corner, our primary customer was Motorola. And this was in the mid-90s when new cell phone models were coming out every 6 months. So as I mentioned, how the design cycle has really been compressed with digital design, Motorola was putting out a new cell phone every 6 months. And if you can imagine, it's challenging to do that for a company to manufacture something every 6 months. And then by the end of the next 6 months, you know, that product is already obsolete and you've got to have another one. So we were prototyping for Motorola. We got a whole bunch of other, and the things we would typically prototype would be the front plastic case and the back case of the entire cell phone that go together and clamp together and have all the electronics on the inside. We had customers like Harley Davidson, all of the big 3 automotive makers, and this was all prototyping back in those days. There are some specific examples that are kind of like, wow, you may have seen about something about 3D printed walls for houses, and that's the same as we use out here as the material extrusion machines, but instead of actually melting the plastic, it's simply extruding it with pressure, and it's typically concrete that gets extruded. So there's some pretty exciting applications there. Another one is on aircraft engines. The fuel injectors or fuel nozzles on General Electric engines that are flying today are manufactured with 3D printing. And it's really complicated how the air and the jet fuel swirl together and then get injected into the combustion chamber of that engine. And the fact that they have 3D printed these parts, and there's so many of them being manufactured, something like 80,000 a year, is really significant. I mentioned the medical examples. There are other ones as well. Hearing aid industry, as you know, the American demographic, people are getting older. The average American is getting older. There's the baby boomers are all reaching their senior years. And in the ear, hearing aids are also primarily 3D printed. What they do is they actually take an impression of a person's ear canal using kind of a silly putty, if you will, and then they pull that out, and it has the reverse of a person's ear canal. They 3D scan it, and then they're able to make a hearing aid shell using 3D printing that matches that ear canal perfectly. They package all the electronics of the hearing aid into that, and you have a perfect fit for the hearing aid. Another is dentistry. I don't know if you all have had like CT scans of your teeth. They have these cone beam scanners that do this big arc and do your whole mouth in one shot. Once once, you know, in dentistry, once that digital impression of your mouth is taken, everything downstream from that can be digital as well. They can make the metal copings that become part of your crowns or your bridges. After they're manufactured using 3D printing, a technician will then paint the porcelain on so it actually looks like a tooth, and then it's glued into your mouth, right? So those metal copings are being made, like 20,000 of those copings per day on metal 3D printers. So dentistry, hearing aids. One final one I'll say before I ask Drew a question, I'm talking a lot, is surgical guides. When someone needs a knee replacement, we used to think that there would be a custom 3D printed implant that would be specific to that patient. Well, what's turned out to be the case is that medical people are actually using standard implants, but what they're doing custom is the surgical guides. So the surgeons have to make a very precise cut on the patient's bones and then adhere the implant to their bones, right? So what we're doing is we're creating these customized plastic temporary guides, which in the operating room are attached to the patient, and then that cut can be very, very precise because there's no way to mess it up. And then once the cut is made, they take the guide off and throw it away and use a standard implant. And this is a very common practice in things like knee replacements. So those are just some examples. And the things that those things have in common, and also rockets. SpaceX, a lot of their rocket nozzles and componentry is also made with metal 3D printing. And those things have a lot in common. One of the things they have in common is that they're very customized. They're very low volume production. If you're going to make 1 million of something, you're probably still going to build a tool, and you're going to injection mold it, or you're going to sand cast it, or investment cast it. You're going to use some mass production method because it's more cost effective. But if you have a very low volume of very complex and high value parts, that is the wheelhouse for 3D printing. That's the niche where 3D printing really works right now in production. All right, so Drew, do you think that 3D printing will replace all other ways of making things? And when I say making things, I mean that it's the same thing as manufacturing. Manufacturing and making things is the very, very same thing in my mind. So do you think 3D printing will replace all other ways of manufacturing?
No. Well, so that's one of the things that I see, you know, people will see a 3D printer, see what it's doing, and see that it's going awesome, and I thought the exact same thing, and I was like, this is going to replace a factory. This is a mini factory, it does everything. Well, it kind of does a lot of things, but it doesn't do everything. So 3D printing is a tool. Just like a hammer is a tool, or just like a screwdriver is a tool, it's used to get something else out of it, for you to have an means to an end of what you're trying to create. And that's what 3D printing is. It's kind of a niche that fits in with lots of other things. So I don't think it's going to replace everything that's going to be in factories. It's more going to be integrated into factories and be used as part of the process with everything else. So if you have a giant CNC machine, which is like a giant machine that has a drill that can cut out different things like wood or metal, or if you have like a laser cutter that can do the same thing only using lasers, those add on to 3D printed parts and stuff like that. Or if you have a factory where you're stamping out parts and stuff like that, well, maybe part of the machine that's stamping out the parts, maybe something breaks on that machine and you can 3D print like a fix that might cost you $10,000 to go and find online, but you could design it and then fix that little part on there that holds the bolt, and then you've just 3D printed that part. And that became a part of that manufacturing process. Or maybe it's used as a tool. Just like the doctors have been using the tools like that for those surgical implants, which I just learned about, that's awesome. To be able to like cut and things like that, it can be used as a tool, as almost like a mold cast to make something else. So let's say that you design some sort of specially designed engine that's really lightweight, and the screws were a special size. Maybe they're triangles or something really weird, and there's no tool that exists to be able to tighten that or put that in there. You could 3D print and create the tool to be used with that part. So it becomes a part of the overall process of creation. So instead of like making all one thing, it's kind of a part of a system of a whole bunch of stuff. And that's kind of what I see 3D printing is going, is to be more and more as companies adopt it, and lots of businesses, like you mentioned, are prototyping it. And that's what a lot of companies do with lots of large companies. When they go and pitch ideas, they'll take something that's 3D printed and they can go and pitch their idea, because then you can actually see how it is, like you have that prototype. And just the same way that it's just one more thing, instead of molding that out of clay like you might have used to do, or cut it out of wood or something like that, or carve it, you now are 3D printing that part that you can take as like a visual aid, as like a model that you can like take around as you're going from place to place. And that's kind of how I see it working in like an industrial and business field. But I'm curious about how you think it's going to be used in houses. Do you think that everyone is going to have a 3D printer in their house?
No, I don't. And the reason I say that is because 3D printers, at least with today's technology, you're going to make one material and at the most 2 to 4 different colors of that material. But most things that you need to replace typically are made of 2 different materials or 2 different things that are assembled together. And a lot of things you need to replace have some kind of an electronic component, whether it's a very simple switch or a very simple printed circuit board of some sort. And those types of things are not the things that you can actually get out of one machine today, and probably not for the foreseeable future. And I will define foreseeable future maybe in the next 7 to 10 years. Maybe I'm dating myself and I'm thinking it's going to be difficult, but maybe 15 years from now there'll be a machine that's affordable for a homeowner, right? Whatever that means, and can actually print out electronics and print in some type of metal and print in plastic and print in multiple materials, so you can actually build an assembly out of one machine that's sitting next to your document printer in your office. But I honestly doubt that. And what I really think is going to happen more is there are going to be local or regional suppliers, much like a FedEx office is now for shipping and for document printing, where a customer would go to have their part made. And they would still need to specify that part. They might need to have some sophistication in terms of how they know how to design things. But then they would actually take it to a service provider like a FedEx, and they would actually produce the part that you're building. I really don't think that it's going to happen that many 3D printers are going to be in houses for production parts. Now, if someone is a hobbyist or a tinkerer or has a really nice garage shop where they really make things or using the CNC router or something like that, then I could definitely see a 3D printer in that shop, but I don't necessarily see it in the home office next to the computer. I was going to say one thing that I thought about while Drew was talking, and this is an expression I've heard about 3D printing. You've heard the expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words, or a model is worth 1,000 pictures. So, back in the day when I first broke into the workforce, we used to have these sheets and sheets and sheets with multiple side views, auxiliary views, etc., to try and define a complex geometry. And sometimes just communicating what the design actually looks like over these sheets of paper would take forever. But if you 3D print that model, man, everyone understands exactly all those subtleties that you can't get from a printed drawing sheet.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that it's going to take a while for 3D printing to be in everybody's homes, if it is ever. And part of the reason is, like, think about if you go and buy like a regular printer now, like you go buy an inkjet printer that's going to print out stuff, and print web pages and documents and things like that. You go buy that thing and you plug it into your computer, and then a lot of times you don't even have to install the drivers anymore. It just goes online, searches for the stuff it needs, it installs, and then you're just ready and you're like, yeah, I want to print this webpage about Lady Gaga, print, and then you just hit print and it just works. And you don't have to worry about anything else. And it cleans itself, and if something goes wrong with it, you just go like clean nozzles. And to change the ink is really easy because it has like very clear instructions that are on it or exactly what to do, and it's really simple to use. Even though it's a really complicated machine, it's been manufactured and engineered enough because it's been around long enough to be really easy to use. And 3D printing isn't there yet. It's still complicated. As any of you that's 3D printed something before, it's hard. And you're going to run into problems, and things are going to happen, and you're going to have to deal with prototyping problems with your design. You're going to have to deal with problems with the machine. You're going to have to deal with problems with your clients maybe, and trying to talk to people. Maybe your teammates, you got to learn how to work together, and like all those different things that are going together can all add up to being a really complicated process, an overall complicated thing that's not as easy as just typing out a paper and then printing it and just hitting print. And until 3D printing gets to that point where it can do like the multiple materials and stuff like that, I don't see it in houses either. And I don't know if it ever will be to that point for those reasons, because it is really expensive and that technology is not quite there yet. Maybe one of you could design it, which would be awesome. But
and also a big company like HP, which is a big company that's now gotten into 3D printing. When these big companies enter 3D printing and start manufacturing parts, by the way, that mesh, that fine mesh that's on a bar that I pass around, that's actually from Hewlett-Packard, an HP 3D printer. And they just introduced that in the last year. So when the big companies, the big printer companies get into 3D printing, I think we'll see more technology acceleration. And all of a sudden we'll have a lot more capability and ease of use. So the theme of this talk is 3D printing in the future. So my next question for Drew is concerns the future. What news or information or innovations in 3D printing have you seen that makes you most excited about the future?
So I am most excited about the biomedical applications. I research some stuff and I get some things from 3dprint.com, which is an awesome place to find out news and updates and stuff on your website.
And so is 3dprintingindustry.com.
3D Printing Industry is really good. Yeah, there's some fantastic blogs and things like that. And one of the things that I love to keep up with are medical printing. So they're working on ways to literally 3D print organs. So they want to be to a point where, and they've already done this in a lab environment, is, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can take stem cells, and then from your stem cells you can stimulate the growth of different organs. And through the growth of the different organs you can grow around like a biomedical frame of something that can dissolve in your body once it grows, or you can literally 3D print cells to the point where they can 3D print skin, to where if you got burned, you could just have someone take your blood, and then from your blood they could literally print you new skin and then replace that. So it'd be like Luke Skywalker's hand in Empire Strikes Back at the end, where he's like getting poked and it's a machine. That could be all 3D printed, and like that is where I'm really excited about the medical application. And part of the reason why I'm so excited about it is the cost. And when you can, once you figure out all of the design costs and the prototyping things, it's relatively inexpensive to get it compared to a lot of other manufacturing techniques and a lot of other medical techniques too. And as all of you guys know, the medical industry is pretty expensive. If something happens, it's expensive. If you don't know that, you'll find out soon, I'm sorry. But that's just the thing, that's just part of it. But one of the amazing things about 3D printing is it can bring the cost way down. So to get a prosthetic limb, or to get some skin printed, or to be able to even print an organ, maybe that you need a new heart valve or something like that, instead of getting a heart transplant, that could be grown from your own cells, for your own body. So you don't have to go on a transplant waiting list for years. You can actually have that organ custom made for you from your own cells for an inexpensive cost, and that is what I'm super excited about.
And I do think that might happen, you know, in the next 20 years. I mean, right now we're able to make bone tissue and 3D print it. They're able to make skin tissue, as Drew mentioned, and they're also able to make liver tissue or other organ tissue, not create an entire organ, but to actually get the tissue that that organ is made of, simulate that and get that going in a laboratory setting. And I lost my next slide. You had a question?
Yes. Are they replicating and duplicating the stem cells? Is that what?
They take stem cells and they centrifuge them and separate them out, and then they put them in a biobath that actually kind of stimulates them and keeps them alive and actually promotes their growth. And then they use material extrusion, whether syringe-based material extrusion 3D printing, to actually create the three-dimensional grid or network that holds the stem cells together.
Yeah, question back.
Have they been working on 3D printing like pancreases for like getting rid of type 1 diabetes?
They haven't gotten to the organ level yet. So the you know it's a lot easier to do tissue like skin tissue than it is to actually create a whole organ, obviously. And the real challenge is nerves and vascular structures, the blood structures. So creating capillaries and the network of vascular systems is very challenging, and 3D printing has not gotten over that hump yet.
So Tim, what makes you most excited about 3D printing?
Well, I see that you know we're in an era now where we have some climate change and we have some CO2 problems and we have sustainability problems, and our oceans are full of garbage. And one of the things that makes me excited is the idea of an on-demand manufacturing world, where manufacturing is done on as-needed, on-demand, instead of having 3 million parts injection molded in China and shipped on a slow boat from China over here for the latest McDonald's promotion, and then when the McDonald's promotion's over, you've got 2 billion silly little figurines that are made out of some plastic that's going to take 40 years to biodegrade, and it gets dumped in the in the landfill. That's the kind of thing I see 3D printing getting us over the hump on, where we're manufacturing only what we need. We're manufacturing really smart products that do the job they're supposed to do and do it very well and last a very long time. So the idea of this consumer throwaway society that you guys are growing up in, that we created for you, changes. And there's like a change in people's mindsets where they're willing to spend money on products and consume, but they want to consume smart products that are manufactured well and manufactured effectively and manufactured to last. and we just become a more sustainable race, and we live on the earth a little bit more intelligently.
You talked about combining just-in-time inventory systems with 3D manufacturing.
That's right, and regional distribution. With 3D printing, you get more of a distributed, potentially a more distributed area where you know, parts are made in your own town, or at least in your own region, and then the carbon footprint of the shipping, which isn't terribly expensive as it turns out, but it still has an effect, it is a lot closer to home. So you have closer and more tighter knit communities of manufacturing. You know, manufacturing, when I was your age, was considered what, dark, dangerous, and dirty. And the idea of a person's head when they heard of manufacturing was this factory belching black smoke into the sky and burned out union workers that didn't care about their jobs. Well, that's not true anymore. You know, manufacturing is digital. Digital manufacturing is where it's at. And 3D printing is only one part of digital manufacturing. Digital manufacturing has affected all manufacturing. It's affected subtractive manufacturing with CNC machining, milling, and that type of thing. It's affected injection molding, and it's affected metal casting. So all of manufacturing now is turning digital. It's a clean technology. Manufacturing is where the jobs are too. You know, for every manufacturing job, it creates like 1.6 to 2 additional jobs in the service industry, because that manufacturing job is kind of the prime source of employment in a community. So we need manufacturing in our communities. We lost over 10 million jobs in manufacturing between 2000 and 2010. Okay, in this country. The steel industry died 10 years before that. So we do need to get manufacturing back in the United States, but it needs to be clean and it needs to be effective. And I see 3D printing as part of the whole digital manufacturing future that's going to help us to achieve that.
And I also think that I know both you and I feel that both these things that we have about 3D printing won't be possible without you. Y'all are the future of 3D printing. Like the things that you're learning right now in your East classes with 3D printing, the process of that, of just printing out something as a prototype that you might think, oh, you know, I just made this part that fixed this chair. Like, oh, I just made a little foot for a chair, it's fine. That's a huge deal that you went through that whole process. And the things that you learned through that process can go on to whatever career you want to go to, or whatever college you want to go to, whatever thing that you would want to do. Maybe it's technical school, maybe it's college, maybe it's straight into the manufacturing workforce. Whatever you would want to do with it are skills that you guys are learning right now. So if you're excited about 3D printing, then just keep designing and keep making stuff and keep printing and keep troubleshooting and keep working it out. Call us if you need help. We're here to help you guys, like every step of the way, to help you guys to keep going forward with 3D printing. And that's something that I know that we're really, really excited about, or to see what happens from just what we've seen. For instance, from the 3D Printed Up competition, just from the entries from there, it was so hard to decide from those entries because they were so awesome. And we can't wait to do that again next year, and we've got some big ideas on how we want to do it next year too, and to see even more innovative ways that 3D printing is being used, and the ways that you're incorporating it to help other people and to help learn the whole process of it, and things that you're going to be able to carry with you, even skills that you wouldn't normally get from 3D printing, like the critical thinking and the problem solving and collaboration and trying to work out prototyping process and all those different things that go together that's going to help you no matter what college or career that you decide you want to go to. So you guys, I'm really, really excited to see what y'all do.
And one point I want to make is that you need more than just the ability to 3D print to be a successful, say, engineer. There's a reason why engineering is a 4-year curriculum, because you need to know about stress and strain. You need to know a lot about materials. You need to know enough about metallurgy to know what kind of material to spec for a part. So if you do want to choose a career in manufacturing, I encourage you to actually learn all those other things. You need to go through the calculus series and learn math. You know, there's a lot of reasons why engineers are engineers, and you have to say, you know, even masters in engineering. You know, it takes a lot of work to get there, because that person has to know a lot of things to make sure that the products they make are going to work and they're going to be safe for the people that use them. So 3D printing all by itself is not enough to go into manufacturing if you want to get to that next level. So if you are interested, and it's not that difficult, don't think of it as difficult. It's just something that has to be done, right? I like to think of the desktop manufacturing, desktop publishing. Back in the early 90s, we called it desktop publishing when Macintoshes first came out. All of a sudden, everyone could be a graphic designer. Some people went to school to become graphic designers and actually learn how to the whole idea of the art and the form of printing and what looks good and what doesn't look good. Then all of a sudden, everyone was a graphic designer because everyone could go out and buy an Apple computer. But what it ended up happening was there was a lot of badness on it. And that's kind of what happens with a person with a 3D printer that doesn't have the educational background behind that, the schooling that's required. So that's another thing I encourage you to do is if you're really interested going forward, you can do it. You can become the next manufacturers, and you will become the next manufacturers, the people that are designing and creating tooling and making a better world. So, Drew, what advice would you give students that are interested in a career in manufacturing in the future?
Well, I think, yeah, both the things that we just talked about.
Yeah.
I would say that,
We already asked
we're talking too much. Yeah, we don't need these anymore, whatever. Yeah. Like, just the process of going through and working hard and figuring out like all those other things like critical thinking and trying to problem solve and the process of it, learning time management skills, having a deadline, like knowing that they need to have this by this certain time, like we got to get this done. And to be able to, like, it's crunch time, we got to focus, we got to do this. Like, those are skills that are going to be with you for the rest of your life. And those are type of skills that you can learn through 3D printing for like managing projects and managing time and managing the critical thinking parts of it and trying to work hard and persevere for it and learning more about just the basics of finding something online and just printing it. You know, because that's the same thing as like printing off a piece of paper. If you're just finding it and printing it, you're not really learning the whole process of the design. And it takes a while. Like 3D design is hard. It's hard. And I'm not an expert designer by any means, because you have to work so long to be able to get good at anything. Just having it, you have to keep practicing and keep working on it. Just like playing a musical instrument. For those of you that play music, anybody play an instrument in here? Yeah. See, so it's awesome. It's really, really fun, but you have to practice. The first time you pick up the clarinet, or the first time I held a pair of drumsticks, it was terrible. And it was awful to try to figure that out. But that's okay, because you're learning how to go through it, and you're learning that process. And then after like a couple days of practicing, you start making music, you start making sounds, and then you keep going forward, and you get better and better and better. And that's the same way it is with anything, just like 3D printing. So if you're interested in it, just keep trying and keep working forward for it. So
I know there were some questions. We can just have an interactive the rest of the time. Just any questions you have, just let us know.
Yeah, so just got a question for us. We'd love to answer it.
I was actually wondering, since there is a big plastic buildup in the world, and is there any ways that we can melt that down and use it as 3D print?
Yeah, so the question is about recycling 3D printed plastic.
Yeah.
And you actually can. There are several products on the market that are called they're filament extruders. So they take the waste material and actually grind it up.
Like a wood chipper.
Yep, grind it up and then melt it and then run it right through an extruder again and make filament again.
And one of the problems with it though is if you mix the different types together. So if you mix, like ABS for instance is made from oil, and PLA is made from like plant-based materials, and if you mix those together, then it's not biodegradable anymore, and those materials might not stick together anymore. So that's been some of the problems with trying to come up with recycling ways, is it's not, if you get it mixed together at all, it's really hard to tell the difference if it's ground up, like which is which, or even when you're like looking at two of them, it's hard to tell like which one's which as you're like looking at it and trying to figure it out.
And that's true of the larger recycling problem in the whole world. You know, it's separating the materials. So you're not really recycling until you're actually remanufacturing the stuff that's been recycled.
Yeah.
If you recycle something but it ends up in a landfill, it's not recycling, right? And unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that we think we're recycling is actually not being remanufactured. So there's a right there a huge opportunity for a young person who wants to make an impact on the world, is figure out how to really remanufacture the stuff, the waste that we create on such a huge scale.
And I'm really passionate about like trying to recycle stuff too, because we deal with lots and lots of plastic as like our company. So I've actually went and talked to people from Washington County, that's the county that we're in Northwest Arkansas, and I talked to their waste management team, and I talked to one of their researchers, and we did some research to see if PLA would be compostable, to be able to take it to where it could go into compost or something like that. And it turns out it's not completely, because even PLA, like since it's made from plant sugar, it has it's biodegradable, but the colors and things that they add to it might not be. So not every company uses colors that are biodegradable, so they can't just take all different types of PLA, because what if one company has really good quality PLA and another company, they're just like cutting corners and adding all kinds of crazy chemicals and stuff to it, then making it not biodegradable anymore, so you can't really add it to a compost yet. So there's lots of different issues going on that need to be resolved with 3D printing, especially if manufacturing, like both Tim and I want to see manufacturing transformed with 3D printing, and all those processes, like recycling is going to be an integral part of that, because we all live on this planet and we all have to take care of it. So that's something that we're all going to have to work for, that we're excited to see you all coming up with ideas in your EAT classes, and the ways that I've seen so many, like walking around and talking to y'all in your booths, like recycling programs at schools and stuff like that. I know that it's on all your minds too, so that's an awesome question, and thanks a lot for asking.
Any other questions?
Have you read any research about individuals that have designed and created like artificial coral reefs, like 3D printing?
Yes.
That can try to, make rebuild coral reefs that are deteriorating.
Yeah, absolutely. So artificial reefs are not necessarily something that's new, because people have dumped cinder blocks into the ocean to try to create, these artificial reefs that become these centers of life under the ocean. But yeah, 3D printed coral, I do remember seeing that a couple years ago. That was a big story. And I don't know how far that's gone since then, but that's another great application where you're actually, the die-off of the coral in the ocean has been pretty incredible in the last 25 years, so it's not a good thing. I don't remember any more of the specifics, though. I know that they were experimenting with it. I think it was somewhere off the Arabian Sea in the Middle East where they were doing this work. Did the models that we pass around stimulate any questions? Anybody wonder about any of those parts?
I saw that the spheroid right there was really fine detailed. Would you be able to keep that same quality if you made it larger scale, like say like 5?
Yeah, so he asked about that sphere that had kind of a filigree pattern in it, just a whole bunch of holes, almost very fine. So that's made by metal powder bed fusion or laser melting, selective laser melting. So that's a powder bed of metal powder and a laser that hits each layer and melts the material, then it immediately resolidifies. The build chamber drops down a little bit, the roller comes across and sweeps another layer of powder on top, and it repeats the process. And the answer is, the question was whether you could scale up that fineness on a larger scale, and you actually can. There are machines that are very precise in this particular process. The other most common metal process is called directed energy deposition, or blown powder. And in that process, you're actually blowing powder into the path of a laser beam, and it's melting on impact. So it's kind of like a welding, but welding with powder. And that process can't do the kind of fine detail that you see with powder bed fusion. Powder bed fusion can scale. And they have very large machines. In fact, the largest machine in powder bed fusion is a 1.5 million euro machine. But you could actually make a V6 engine block all in one piece in that build chamber in metal. So it's pretty amazing technology. Yeah.
Okay, so you guys were talking about biomedical engineering of 3D printing. So most prosthetic parts weigh, upwards of 10 pounds per body part. And I was thinking, has there been any advances in the whole central nervous system surgeries with 3D prints? Like when you fuse cervical discs?
Yeah, there are. In fact, I didn't bring it with me, but I have another sample. It's an intervertebral implant. So it actually goes in between two vertebrae, and it creates a spacer. It's basically a spacer. And it's made of lightweight metal. And it also has that same kind of filigree pattern that we saw in that sphere. So it has a lot of space between all the parts. So it's lightweight, but it's also very strong. That's one thing you can do with advanced computing these days, is you can actually manufacture metal parts that are as light as possible. So the process is called topology optimization. It's kind of a big word, I call it top-op. But it's basically using math and finite element analysis to create the lightest part with the least mass possible to satisfy the initial conditions. So you end up getting these really cool-looking, bionic-looking parts. They actually simulate nature in a way, in their shapes. And you can manufacture them by machining. But with 3D printing, you can manufacture them. So you can make these really interesting, lightweight, strong parts using 3D printing just because it's a digital manufacturing technology. And you're using finite element analysis and computational fluid dynamics, that whole mesh computing type of thing, to make a really lightweight part.
So does anybody have any more questions? We got time for like one more question if somebody has one. one more, yeah.
Yeah, with the actual like powder mill 3D printer, is it a metal-based object or is it a plastic-based object? Like, is it pure metal like the 3D printed object or is it plastic?
It is pure metal. When metal first came out, it was kind of a mashup. It was a metal particle that was encased in a plastic binder, and the 3D printer actually just melted the plastic binder. And then you'd have to take the green part and put it in a furnace and go through a secondary process where you burned out the binder and then infiltrated a second metal. Now they're just doing directly metal, and they're making titanium. Titanium used to be extremely expensive because it's really hard to process to the point where it gets to an ingot stage where you're going to machine something, whether it's a cylinder or a big block. But now with titanium, you can go straight to powder and then make things on a 3D printer. And it turns out that the process from ore to part is a lot cheaper than that. So now people can design and use titanium, which has been called the wonder metal, because it's so much lighter than steel and it's so much stronger than aluminum. You can actually start making and speccing things in titanium because it's finally cost effective. It's also very common. It's one of the most common metals on Earth, which is kind of surprising because I didn't realize that until I learned that. But so that's just an example of yeah, you can go pure metal, and by going straight to powder, you can actually have more options in metals than you would otherwise with traditional manufacturing.
All right, awesome. So thanks a lot for coming, guys. And if you want to check out any of the prints over there as you're leaving, feel free to. And have a great conference. See y'all later. Thanks a lot.
I have a statement more